Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Now let's take a moment and really look at this building. Now ask yourself, does this look like something that was built casually with horse carts and hand tools during a time when San Francisco was supposedly still forming as a city? Now, what you're looking at is the original San Francisco City Hall. The cornerstone was supposedly laid in 1872 in a Masonic ritual. Now, it took over 25 years to build, and yet they destroyed it. They say it collapsed in the Great Earthquake of 1906, but the deeper that you look, the stranger that the story gets. Because this wasn't just any building, this was an architectural marvel. The scale alone rivals the Capitol buildings in Washington, D.C., the massive granite columns, the multi-story carved stone arches, and the dome that reached into the heavens. With a 3,000-pound statue standing over 20 feet tall, proudly representing the goddess of progression. This architecture alone represents divine symmetry. Every inch of this structure echoed a lost language of artistic intelligence. But why would something so grand be erased? And more importantly, how? When we really study the historical photos, a disturbing pattern emerges. Fires, earthquakes, explosions, seemingly orchestrated devastation, always blamed for the destruction of these old world wonders. But somehow the earthquake only seems to target those monumental stone buildings, while wooden shacks, telephone poles, and smaller brick buildings remained intact. Was it really just a natural disaster? Or was it something else? Something coordinated. Something hidden. All across the world we see the same thing. From Chicago to New York, Paris to San Francisco. Between the late 1800s and the early 1900s, dozens of stunning neoclassical cities were wiped out mysteriously, renovated, or destroyed, almost as if someone wanted to erase a former civilization. Now consider this. The trowel used to lay the cornerstone of the City Hall bears a date, not from our Gregorian calendar, but from the Masonic calendar, the Anno Lucius, 5872. That translates to 1872 in our current dating system. But the Masonic system adds 4,000 years to your count, tracing its origins to a time long before the accepted history of our civilization. Why would they only engrave that date? Why not include the Gregorian year as well? Unless they were aligned with a timeline far older than we've been taught. And what happened to the statue on top? The goddess of progression, removed, decapitated, and her head severed from her body after demolition. Now what does that symbolize? Why would they take the time to do that? Maybe it was never about restoring a building. Maybe it was about severing our connection to the past, erasing our memory, destroying evidence of a world far more advanced than we've been led to believe. So as these images pass before you, take them in, not just as relics, but as proof. Proof that something much deeper is buried beneath our modern narrative. And we're just beginning to remember.
So I think I discovered something amazing right now, and this is on the Library and Museum of Freemasonry. Okay, so stay tuned. We're going to dive deep into this one, because this right here is a smoking gun. Okay, so this is the actual trowel that was used to lay the cornerstone of the original City Hall of San Francisco. And of course, this is all still part of the propaganda, I believe, right? Because the Masons had access to information. They had access to the ancient libraries. They'd be able to manipulate history in this way as well. So, of course, I'm still questioning everything. But this right here is huge, okay? So, the smoking gun, the timeline engraved in steel. An artifact that exposes the greatest illusion of all time itself. This isn't just a relic. This isn't just a ceremonial Masonic trowel used to lay the cornerstone of the San Francisco original City Hall of 1872. This is the smoking gun. Because when you flip the sacred object over, etched into metal with immaculate precision, you're not just reading a dictation. You're staring directly into a rift in time. The 22nd of February, AL, the year 5872. Now, if anyone else had questions about the year 5872, considering that the year was supposed to be 1872, that's not a typo, that's not damage, that's not misread. That's a complete different timeline. The AL stands for Anno Lucas, in the year of light. It's the Masonic calendar, and just like that, we're face to face with one of the most blatant pieces of evidence that an entirely different calendar system, an entirely different reckoning of time, is in use behind the curtains. The Anno Lucas calendar adds exactly 4,000 years to the Gregorian calendar. But why are two timelines being used? Why do the Freemasons and the elite lineages that they are tied to still operate under a timeline that most of humanity doesn't even know exists? Take you to your core. Because it reveals that time itself has been weaponized. If they can run multiple timelines, what else can they control? If they dedicate buildings with a sacred calendar you've never heard of, what does that say about your history books? This isn't some abstract theory. This is a physical object, held in ceremony, used by the Grand Masters of Masons in California, engraved with a timeline hidden from the public, yet central to their rituals and worldviews. It begs the question, what calendar are you living on, and who wrote it?
There's all kinds of anomalies about the City Hall from San Francisco. Now, first things first is that they built the original City Hall. They started in 1870, and it took them something like 27 years to complete. But then, after it was completed, it was destroyed, a few years later in the 1906 earthquake. So they rebuilt the new City Hall starting in 1913 to 1916. So 3 years they built this new one. Took them, 27 years to build the older one. But not even just that, just the fact of the sheer mass of this building is unbelievable. I'll show you photos in a moment, but we're going to read a little bit of the history here because all these things start to scream red flags at me. Now, the San Francisco City Hall stands near the site of the older City Hall, which was built in 1870 and damaged beyond repair from the 1906 earthquake and fire. Now, this newer City Hall was built on top of a cemetery, so that alone is very weird and disrespectful in all ways. But in 1911, San Francisco appointed a committee of architects to under the supervision of John Galen Howard to select a site for the new Civic Center. So this person apparently is responsible for choosing the cemetery, okay? Now, and a competition was announced for the designer of the City Hall, limited to San Francisco architects, right? 73 individual firms competed. And the firm of the Baker, Well, and Brown won the first prize in the 1912 and was awarded the design contract, right? So Louis Bourgeois, designer, the interior, and Henry Crenier created the sculptures in the rotunda, right? So both men were killed while serving in the French army during World War I, right? So right away, they're just going to go ahead and dismiss these two characters who have play a very profound role in creating not only the architecture, but the sculptural design. Okay, so that right there is kind of interesting. And then, of course, right here we have City Hall, like most public buildings of that time, was designed in the classical style of the Greek and Roman, right? The Greek and Roman style, by men who were trained at the École des Beaux Arts in Paris. Now, this is a very famous architectural design school in Paris. If you look up Julia Morgan, she's one of the architects supposedly responsible for the Hearst Castle. But I have a lot of unique red flags screaming at me about that as well, because when you look up William Hearst, you'll know that he ran the San Francisco Examiner. So he had pretty much capabilities of, in a sense, pulsing propaganda through his newspaper tycoon firm. And so he could have had a high influence on not only, creating propaganda that could easily dismiss these ancient buildings and also alter our timelines, but also apparently he was into disassembling full monasteries and reassembling them here. So if that doesn't kind of scream another red flag that these massive tycoons were
taking and buying full monasteries from Spain and taking apart full ancient castles and then rebuilding them here for their own pleasure, that already proves that they could basically take old buildings and rebuild them, within a certain period of time. So right away, it starts to make me question a lot of the historical timeline here around City Hall. So let's go. Let's see what else we can find. Here, news of San Francisco's history. And this is how they've been, this is only them regurgitating the indoctrination and the newspaper printed information from centuries ago. And I'm going to follow all the way back to when William Randolph Hearst, acquired the SF Examiner and now has become, this newspaper tycoon that could control, and he's been known for manipulating the outcome of wars and just doing dirty work with his newspaper company. And so being able to control the masses with his printing presses, okay? So now we're going to go ahead and jump into this article. It's all about basically, behold the shoddiest public building ever constructed in San Francisco. So right away, they're trying to bag this sacred ancient site, this ancient building, okay? And in retrospect, perhaps building San Francisco's new City Hall, this is the new one they're erecting, over an 8,000 soul graveyard was an inauspicious start. Okay, so in preparation for the city's soon-to-be grandest building, thousands of coffins were relocated to Colma in 1870, right? Just like we saw in that other newspaper article. But when construction started in the mid-1870s, workers kept finding more bodies. By 1889, over 70 bodies accidentally left behind in the move had been dug up by unfortunate workers, right? If the city was looking for an omen, they would have hit it on the head with this discovery. I don't know exactly which city hall was buried over the cemetery. It could have been both of them at this point, because even the new city hall was built on a cemetery, and there's newspaper articles about the new one. But this is them saying that they actually discovered bodies in 1870. So this would have been them building this. This is the old city hall. Okay, so somehow they're building these sacred sites over cemeteries each time. I want everyone to really look at that and dissect this. This is coming off of SF Gates. This is a well-known site for San Francisco's history. Okay, now here's where we start to tie in William Hearst and when he actually took over on the SF Examiner. It was in his family's name since the 1880s, but in 1887 is when William Randolph Hearst actually published a few articles, bagging these buildings and how they're, not up to date, and how he basically put out propaganda about these ancient buildings. And then I think he was part of probably having them destroyed, right? After the 1906 earthquake, they used every excuse that they could to destroy these buildings, pushing propaganda through his newspaper, tycoon. So William Randolph Hearst took over the San Francisco Examiner in 1887, but keep in mind his father ran it from 1880 until 1887 and then handed it down to his son. His son transforming it with sensationalism and muckraking, and ran it for decades, right? Making it a populist powerhouse that exposed corruption, including scandals around the old city hall. So first thing they point out is that, he called out corruption about the city hall, right? Attacking political figures and companies involved in the graft, establishing his yellow journalism reputation before moving to New York in 1895 to push this propaganda machine, right? 1887, Hearst, at 23, he took over the struggling newspaper, okay? So he has a lot of bad things to say about the city hall, but then later when we analyze what else he likes to create propaganda behind, I asked my mother if she knew about him, and she said, yeah, he pushed a lot of propaganda about marijuana. And so I looked him up real quick. I said, did William Hearst make propaganda campaign around marijuana? And it says, yes, the newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst used his media empire to spread anti-marijuana propaganda, motivated in part by the threat of the industry of the hemp that posed to his extensive investment in the timber and wood pulp paper industry. So right now, that is a direct confirmation that we know that he used this massive force to push propaganda in his favor, but also he could have used it in every different way to destroy old world history, right? Hearst's propaganda campaigns, sensationalist journalism. Hearst's newspapers engaged in yellow journalism, publishing inflammatory and often fabricated stories that linked cannabis use to violent crimes, insanity, and moral decay. So he was definitely the one who created the reefer madness and pushed all the propaganda to stop marijuana because of hemp as an industry that, in a sense, we're seeing that cannabis was a threat to William Randolph Hearst's, empire. And so, they create these propaganda campaigns that, create enough people who are against marijuana. And there was a thin line between blurring marijuana and hemp here, right? Conflicting hemp and marijuana. Hearst's campaigns deliberately blurred the lines between the psychoactive marijuana and the industrial hemp, a non-psychoactive fiber used for products like paper, textiles, and rope. By demonizing all forms of the cannabis plant, he sought to elite the legitimate industrial competitors to his timber business, right? And he also created these racial slurred articles. The articles often preyed on racial prejudice, associating the use of marijuana, a term he promoted over the common cannabis name, right, to sound foreign and alienating, right? And we know that that word cannabis actually at this point has roots all the way back to the Dogon tribe in Africa, where they believe, the word canna itself was linked to canine, and bis was the number 2. So it would have been the 2-dog star, which in relation, I think I did a breakdown on that article right here, where I asked, the word cannabis with origins connected to the Dogon tribe, and it said the idea that the word cannabis is linked etymologically to the Dogon tribe and an often planet source, the star Sirius B, is a circulating theory, a part of an alternating history narrative, right? So right here it says the anecdotal theory. According to this narrative, the word cannabis has roots in African language, where canna might mean the canine or dog, and bis means 2. So translating the 2-dog planet. Okay, proponents of this theory link it to the Dogon tribe of the Mali, who have advanced ancient astronomical knowledge of the binary star Sirius, right? So Sirius A and Sirius B, right? And Sirius B was actually connected to like the dolphins, and there was a lot of myths about how these gods came to our planet and they made a pact with different tribes that they were going to inhabit the oceans of this planet. So the dog star is connected to the dolphins as well. And the belief is that, here we go, an amphibious extraterrestrial race from Sirius, the Namos, visited the Dogon and shared this knowledge along with the 2-dog planet. Which was used for spiritual and communication purposes. So they linked us up, and in a sense, maybe he even knew about this. Maybe the propaganda being pushed was to dismiss that word as well, to get rid of that. Who knows how deep this knowledge actually goes with what they were trying to erase, right? So he made it so the words sound foreign, with Mexican immigrants and African Americans contributing to the climate of fear. And right during the Great Depression. So he really got a hold of people through this propaganda. Hearst owned vast timber lands, and the mills that produce wood, pulp, newspapers gave him a competition edge in the publishing business. So the emergence of new machinery capable of processing hemp into cheap, more durable paper presented a significant financial threat to his empire. So now the truth is coming out, right? He doesn't necessarily publish true, authentic, journalism at this point. He's actually pushing his own agenda. This media campaign, combined with the efforts of other industries like the chemical company DuPont. So now he's linked up and connected with the DuPont big, these are big tycoons, but this is military industrial stuff, right? Which saw hemp as a rival to its new synthetic fiber nylon. It helped to create the public and political pressure that led to the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, right? Effectively criminalizing all cannabis in the United States. So this was just the first step in their agenda to be able to control marijuana, but also control history, right, through propaganda. And they're working together at this point. So stay tuned. Let's see how deep it all really gets, right? Closely look at what they're telling us, because a lot of this stuff kind of raises some suspicion, especially when I look at the timeline of when William Hearst took over the SF Examiner and really was pushing, the propaganda machine. So San Francisco had grand hopes for its first real city hall. From its inception, the gold rush town had used smaller buildings, nothing really purposed or built for a true metropolis. So right away they're trying to push this thing that, none of these buildings were here. But flush with wealth in the 1870s, because we just were this booming gold rushing town, so we had endless money. But they printed the money anyway, so it didn't matter. It's all just propaganda. The city held a nationwide contest to select a design for a massive new city hall complex near the site of today's San Francisco Public Library, okay? Once again, similar to the newer city hall, they threw this competition. The winner was Auguste Levoir, the architect of the New York State Capitol in Albany. So I don't know if they create these, this historical timeline about having to redesign it over and over again just to kind of push a narrative, but I'm open to it. But to me, if you look at these images, look in the background here, this is what they're going to try and act like this wasn't up to par for the people. The people were upset about this building, okay? The contracts started going to devious bidders, and speculations ran rampant about cronyism, although almost everything about the buildings is now lost to history. Okay, so they constantly will lose everything to history. Original plans, contracts, and sketches all disappeared in the 1906 earthquake. The numbers speak for themselves. The project was set to cost $1.5 million. As construction dragged on into its second decade, it cost $4 million mark, okay? Over $107 million today. So once again, when they talk about money, it doesn't matter because they're printing the money, okay? This is at a time when, they bring up the gold rush is also something I want to really dive deep into, okay? But let's tune in a little bit further.
Competition was held for the design of the new San Francisco City Hall. It was won in 1871 by the architectural firm of Fuller and Lever. Augustus Lever was then 37 years old. Born in Folkestone, England, he had moved to the United States in 1857, and then on to Ottawa, where Lever and Stent won the architectural competition for Ottawa's departmental building. Several years later, they were removed from that commission as construction costs escalated far beyond their initial estimates. In 1866, Lever won notice in design competitions for various buildings for the New York State Capitol at Albany. He moved to Albany. With Thomas Fuller, he won the competition to design the New York State Parliamentary Building. Again, construction proved controversial. By the completion of the Parliamentary Building, Lever and Fuller were no longer employed as its architects. Lever and his family moved to San Francisco in 1871. By 1879, he had designed and built a large country estate, Linden Towers, for James C. Flood, situated on the grounds that now constitute the eastern third of Atherton, south of San Francisco. In 1879, U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant traveled by boat to pay a state visit to San Francisco. Grant received a public reception at the Sandlots at City Hall's construction site. The sandlots referred to the open lot sand between the south face of the slowly growing City Hall and Market Street. Linden Towers was said to have been the setting for Flood's attempt to connect his daughter with Grant's son. Lever's Nob Hill Mansion for James C. Flood was completed in 1886 of Yerba Buena Park's difficult triangular site. With the city's neighborhoods beginning to differentiate and segregate in the 1870s, he addressed the issues of public and elite access. He pulled the north arms of City Hall outward to form a carriage entrance, embracing elite arriving from Nob Hill or Van Ness Avenue. The City Hall's formal public entrance was placed on the building's south facade facing Market and 8th, open to the main public transportation systems and the growing expanse of working-class housing and factories in Soma. The public entrance became a vibrant focus for city activity.
Have you been waiting for a quantum confirmation? Can you feel something shifting inside? make sure to watch our latest episode on Gaia TV.
Crystals can communicate with the pineal gland magnetically. These stones actually attune to our auric field, our auric energy, and they will amplify their glow when you're going through a conscious state. And so at night, I picked the piece up and I saw it was glowing, and I put it to my third eye, and it literally stuck with the strongest magnetic vortex I've ever had. I could take it off, I could shake my head, this thing would completely stick magnetically. So what that told me is that these crystals, they communicate through magnetics to the microcrystals that are housed inside of the ventricles of the brain that are in direct communication with the pineal gland. They've tried to mimic the human with microchip technologies. And I believe that the pineal gland is almost like a quantum quasi-crystal that allows us to access almost like the torsion toroidal field of the holographic simulation that we're experiencing. We want to have a fully activated endocrine system, fully activated pineal gland. Fluoride in our water severs the link that allows the cerebral spinal fluid to flow up into the ventricle of the brain that houses the pineal gland. It severs the link right at the brain stem.
So we don't want fluoridated water.
No, you want
coming from its main public boulevard, Market Street. Most arrive by foot or by horse-drawn carts and rail cars. Some, however, arrive by servant-driven horse-drawn carriages. City Hall provides an elegant entrance, a carriage court facing northwest, enabling those who live in the mansions and apartments on nearby Nob Hill, Van Ness Avenue, and Pacific Heights access to city chambers without crossing the common folk coming from Market Street. This was a city hall that acknowledged and presented itself to a range of San Francisco social classes.
Because construction occurred only when the city had cash, funds on hand to pay for it, right? So they keep coming up with excuses why they had to stop this project. It's just their way of, showing you and controlling the narrative, right? Work often stopped, and when it resumed, it was of questionable quality, right? And so now we're going to look at timelines. So look at in July in 1887. This is right when William Randolph Hearst took over the SF Examiner and was pushing a lot of the propaganda machine. So over 10 years into the project, the new City Hall Commission summoned Lavore before them. The building's concrete foundation, they learned, was incredibly shoddy. Despite costing a great deal of money, Lavore argued that the commissioner told him to make the changes. San Francisco's mayor, Edward Pond, asked why. As chief architect, he did not push back. And he said, "I had to do so much to keep my position." Lavore shot back while he was on this topic, and Lavore unloaded a bit more. He said that the commission forced him to make expensive choices after expensive choice, and he said that they swapped pine floors for marble, demanding granite approaches to the complexes and many entry points, and added more towers to the design. So either way, what they're basically saying is that he made it more magnificent. They pushed for the marble. They pushed for it more expressive and more powerful. But look at what they're complaining about. Look at the size of these buildings right here. And I want people to really think about what it must have taken to create the foundation of this. I mean, this is unbelievable what we're looking at, and this is what they're complaining about. This is the propaganda machine that I'm trying to point out. That William Randolph Hearst was known for pushing propaganda, and so I think around this time was when they had the idea to basically demolish these buildings, get rid of our ancient heritage sites, because this is something that was supposed to be here for lifetimes. I mean, I'm talking thousands of years, right? This is something that they had to use dynamite to destroy. That's a fact at this point. And we'll go through the images to prove it. When you look at the images and the destruction, you come to your own conclusion, but it's what I feel. And how the construction had to, keep going. And so in 1890, if you look right here, this is where the massive dome would have been, right? They supposedly finished that last. But
viewed from afar, City Hall as built presented a busy Victorian demeanor with many towers and large colonnades, instead of the original, less idiosyncratic, unified French period styling of Lever's original design.
But right away, that kind of has me asking more questions. And here they say the towers were another issue. By 1890, the building still unfinished, the structure's large decorative towers were already breaking. Architects told the commissioners that they had too much dead weight. worryingly, the plaster appeared to be warping in some spots. So yeah, this is such a joke. And if you look with your own eyes at what we're looking at here, right? Those buildings are so structurally sturdy. This is unbelievable. This is the type of ancient architecture that lasts for thousands of years. Go look at any of the ancient sites that are honored through antiquity right now, and you'll see they look exactly like this. This is the type of architectural foundation that you need to support these types of buildings. And they were saying that these were not structurally sound to hold these towers. Now that is just a complete joke. There's no possible way that the foundation, and I'll post a few images over this image so you can see what I'm talking about when you see them standing on these blocks, the foundation of what these buildings are created on. This was created by a master architect, someone who literally understood. It was probably thousands of years of information handed down to even create on this level, but this is what I'm looking at, and we'll go a little bit deeper here too, okay? Too much dead weight, right? They're talking about these decorative towers up top. They had too much dead weight, and it's just not possible when you look at the photo yourself, okay? Then the commissioners decided the solution was to fire Levi, right? So fire this architect who built this marvel, apparently. I mean, remember, this is all propaganda at this point, okay? So they had to fire Levi. They brought in 6 more head architects before the complex was finally complete in 1897, okay? So, but this is, its opening ceremony was colored by the 25 years of costly construction. So, of course, the city was supposedly upset about this. More reason to destroy this building, this sacred site. This is why it's laughable, okay? But even when they complete, right, the dome right here, this dome is supposedly what fell down first, right? So even though they brought on these 6 new architects, this is what fell first, right? So this is why it's so, everything about it is all kind of lying to us. And then see this amazing, beautiful statue up top? There's a little bit of a magical story behind this statue in itself, and it all ties into the beheading of ancient statues, but you'll see the propaganda behind it. So anyways, stay tuned. Let's see what's next, all right?
These are the types of stories that you have to just tear apart, you know, because this is the story of conquer, right? Conquering and destroying and claiming ownership over something. So I'm trying to do a little bit of research and find when they took this statue down, right? And to find out that the goddess of progress, also the goddess of liberty, right? From San Francisco's original city hall, served the 1906 earthquake, but was eventually removed. Her large bronze head broke off during transportation in the early 1900s and was lost for decades, right? We just somehow lost this sacred statue that represented, you know, liberty and, you know, progression to us. This was something that stood on the top of the city hall. The head of the statue weighed 700 pounds. This is just the head. You don't lose something like this. You hold it sacred as if it's the Statue of Liberty, okay? City Hall has a historical relic, symbolizing resilience, while the main statue's fate after removal from the old building is less detailed, right? For some reason, no one knows what happened to this thing, with her head becoming the famous artifact, okay? So I'm like, well, what happened? I'm reading down here, and it says, number 3, removal, and the heads fell, right? Like, how do they even explain it? Like, the heads fell. This is what you do. You cut the heads off of the statues of a place that you conquer, and that's exactly what they did, and they just covered it up here with this little story, saying that, you know, the removal of the heads fall. When the old city hall was demolished around 1909, so now we know around 1909 it finally came down. Earthquake in 1906, 3 years this thing still stood tall because they could barely take it down. It took them 3 years to demolish it. The statue was being removed, and the 700-pound head just broke off. Keep in mind that this is like one of those casted statues that are unbreakable. And it fell from a wagon, okay? This is how it broke off, when it fell from a wagon going so rapidly fast that this massive statue that must have weighed upward near, 2,000, roughly 3,000 pounds, considering that just the head alone is 700 pounds, right? So do the math, and it fell off the back of a wagon, and the head accidentally broke off, surviving the accident. The head did, but the body went missing, okay? Lost and found, number 4. The head was lost for years, changing hands before being returned to the city in 1950, okay? So you see what I'm saying here. I'm pointing this out because this is exactly what they did when they would conquer places. They would cut the heads off of the statues in the tallest locations, and this is exactly what they've done here. They went and chopped the head of the Statue of Progression, the Statue of Liberty here in California, in Old World San Francisco. Let's see what we can find. And we'll take a closer look at the dome, right, and the Statue of Progress, right, the Goddess of Progress. It's at the top of the dome here. This is the City Hall, 1906, after the earthquake. To me, when I look at these images, it just doesn't scream earthquake to me. It looks more like someone, tried very hard to destroy this building, and they didn't even accomplish much. It feels like with dynamite, they still couldn't, destroy these steel beams, all of this. And now when we know that the head of this statue weighs 700 pounds, you got to look at the weight of the rest of the statue itself, and then also the rest of the dome ornamentation here. And I mean, the fact that the earthquake didn't even take this down, it looks like literally they had to just use whatever they could to try and destroy this building. And it literally took them until I think 1916 to finally finish demolishing this thing, right? So it took them 10 years just to slowly demolish it. I mean, that's how powerful these buildings actually were. And then of the, Statue of Progress, right? All that remains anyway, the head of the Goddess of Progress statue on the dome of the old City Hall, saved when the ruin itself was finally pulled down in 1909. That was just this ruin of the statue. They couldn't destroy the whole building even until 1919 or 1916 or something like that. It's now on display in the City Hall, and that's what we just kind of looked at, where they removed some of the antiquitech and the amazing magic to the actual goddess's head. So right there we have some more questions to ask. Let's see what we can find.
Okay, so this image is really important. So if we're supposed to buy the official narrative, when you look at these towers after the earthquake that supposedly brought down these massive pillars and columns, we have to then say, why are all the spires still standing tall after such a massive earthquake, right? Now, let's focus specifically on the spire on the right-hand side. Notice how there's no support from the right-hand side in any way. So to me, it just doesn't make sense that everything else massive about this building would come down, yet those still stand. Okay, so this is more of the earthquake damage, but I want you to look in the bottom left-hand corner and see those entry points. I feel like there's something interesting going on here. How did earthquake damage create that? So this one is highly profound because we see how they tried to dismiss the foundation of these buildings, yet we see how powerful the cement work was on the foundation of even the light post itself. So let's look deeper into that.
Thank you very much for watching. If you're enjoying our content and would like to support, we now have our book available for pre-order over on our website. Just go ahead and click the link down below. Thank you very much. This is the head of the Statue of Progress that was on top of City Hall, San Francisco. Started the 1870 to 1899, supposedly, okay? Now what we're going to get into is some stuff that they're hiding from us, and now I'm going to point it out directly, and I want your opinion, of course, okay? This is from the SF Gates Historical Society, okay? And right here is the ceremony where they finally received the head again. But I just want to show you how there's no possible way this story is authentic, right? And everything about it is so manipulated. So the head of the Goddess of Progress, the statue that stood atop the old San Francisco City Hall, it survived the 1906 earthquake and fire only to fall off of a truck that was transporting it, okay? So that happened, and I'll show you the other article. Supposedly the statue fell off a truck, the head just perfectly broke off, and the body went missing, okay? I'll show you that in another article because all of this stuff just doesn't make sense. If you literally were the truck transporting this sacred statue, this is like a monumental piece of our nation's history right here. For it to fall off the back of a truck and just be dismissed and go, and the head went missing for like 36 years inside someone's basement, okay? No, some elite ruler who wanted to organize and orchestrate our historical timeline stole this piece of history only to display it
without the antiquitech, right? If you notice when we zoom in on this next photo, you'll see that there's actual tubes that probably supplied some form of propane gas, so these flames could actually be emitted out of the head of the goddess of progress. But I want you to really think about what they've been telling us. Leave a comment down below if you really feel like the head fell off of the statue, or did they remove it on purpose in a ritual of dominance?
What I want to do now is I want to show you the actual head that's on display in City Hall right now. And right now I want you to look up close at the head of the goddess of progress. And notice these little tubes that must have shot fire out of some sort. But notice what happens when they display it now in City Hall. So notice how all of those tubes are missing. So what is it that they're trying to hide from us? And why would they not just represent the authentic head? I know they probably just are going to claim that they made a replica in case someone came in and tried to steal this thing. But I'm also going to point something else out. This head was in the article, they claimed it was 400 pounds. Later, they weighed this head. It was 700 pounds, okay? And now they're wondering where the body actually is, because if that's the weight alone of just the head of the statue of progress, our nation's historical monument that sits on top of the city hall, right? The hall of records that we have, right, for our nation's history, for San Francisco's history, okay? This is where it gets interesting. So we're going to go ahead and switch back one more time. And I just want you to see that. Look at the way that the eyes spiral in, right? So to me, and you see the 3 spikes on the top of her crown there. So we're going to go back real fast and notice he's holding the 3rd spike, right? These are the 2 other spikes, and that's exactly where this amazing extra piece should be. And same right here. There should be another one right there in between them. So we know something's going on. Right now, I would like some people, if you can, ask some questions. Reach out. Let's see what's going on here. What are they trying to hide from this? Is this more of the antiquitech, right? The ancient technology that was built into the architecture? Was there some way that they wanted to remove those? Stay tuned. Let's see what else we can find.
Hidden within the architecture, and how much more visually stimulating and activating it was, I believe, to us back then. I mean, look at this and look at what it does for us. It holds visual Akashic history. It holds visually stimulating geometric precision. It holds, encoded within it, it holds a story that connects us to our past. And when this is all destroyed, what do you have left? You have images left. You can't necessarily go and feel the energy, feel the geomancy of these sacred locations in their full spectrum if they've destroyed these beautiful earth architectural mandalas that they've created. Now we're stuck with just grasping at what they were doing when they created these powerful architectural masterpieces and what we all believe were our antiquitech, and they were part of their circuitry that was plugged into the Earth's grid, and they were accessing the energy, the free energy, like Tesla was, right? Free energy that is accessible to us at all times. And so when you see these domes and these pillars and how much intention to detail was put into the way that these seem to source energy, and the types of materials that they're using, the copper domes on the rooftops, and the ways that they're conducting the energy and directing the energy, and there's always a flow of water that's flowing and also carrying and programming that information and that technology, allowing that technology to flow from one place to another. So a lot of it had to do with activating the water, the living waters. Look at this photo right here. In 1893, the World Columbian Exposition in Chicago. And if you look further into these world fairs, I'm going to go ahead and save this image, you'll start to see that some of them had over 100 structures, over 100 buildings that were dedicated to different marvels. almost as if completely just inherited, and then we need to come up with some sort of an idea on what to do with these sacred buildings after we've inherited them. And so they maybe have been renamed, and then here we go, just another view. I love this 1893, how much energy was put into creating this beauty. And so it leaves us questioning the narrative, and questioning, and look at this is great because this is all propaganda. It looks like it. I mean, almost photoshopped even too. We'll see. I'm going to snapshot this and do more research into this. This is probably one of the glass palaces that were burned down. I mean, another one of the architectural marvels of this world, as they were creating these glass palaces that actually were growing. They were creating an environment inside that could grow things 10 times as fast, tropical environments inside these little glass palaces. And so why would they ever want to destroy them unless they didn't want us to still access this technology?
Well, I think this is a perfect place to end the video. Thank you so much for watching and diving into this topic with me. By now, I think we've uncovered some serious questions worth reflecting on. From the deliberate removal of the goddess of progress's head to the mysterious Anna Lucius calendar carved on the Cornerstone trowel, a date that bypasses the Gregorian system entirely. We've seen how San Francisco's old city hall wasn't just a casualty of nature, but part of a larger pattern, one echoing globally. And as we continue digging, both physically and metaphorically, we find coffins, skeletons, and layers of buried architecture beneath the streets of San Francisco, reminding us that our history is far older and far more complex than we've been led to believe. Thank you very much. Please share, like, and subscribe to our channel. Your support is how we make this all happen. So if you like this type of content, please hit the bell button up above. It'll keep you tuned in when we release new videos, so stay tuned and enjoy.
Well, that's all for part 1, and I hope everyone enjoyed the ride. If you are still seeking more content, I'm actually creating part 2 right now, so go look for this thumbnail above, and I'll have this video posted within a week or two. So stay tuned as we dive deeper into who built the goddess of progress and its connection to the Bohemian Grove. So let's go down the rabbit hole and enjoy the night. If you like my video, please hit the thumbs up button and share, like, and subscribe, and I will continue to bring you consciously evolving new content that will open up your mind and will inspire the sovereign explorer within you to step outside the confines of our busy everyday reality to explore the mysteries that this life has to offer. Thank you.